Okay, this week's lesson is about the strange world of sensation and perception, chapter 3. And just to start us off here in terms of how people perceive things. Now, what you're seeing here is a picture of uh, of Mars from one of the Martian rovers, and you can see the desert, and you can see the rocks there. And if you look real close on top of that rock, there's a lizard sunning himself. Here, let me zoom in on that a little bit. And there you go. So you can see that could be a lizard. That's how some people perceive this. You could see its head there and its eye and on the side of its head, and you could see its feet there. Or some people just perceive this as just another Mars rock. So anyway, it's kind of a lead-in to our discussion for today. So let's get some terms here, and these will probably be on the study guide and probably be on the exam. But now your sensations are really just meaningless bits of information, random signals to the brain from the sense organs. So your sensations are from your sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. The perceptions, on the other hand, are what results when the brain puts all those random signals together in some meaningful way so we can understand what they mean and how to act on them. So just to get the terms right, the sensations are what our senses. See that word, this is a magic word, an easy way to know that is sensation is senses. Senses, what your senses take in. Your perception is how the brain puts all that together. So, speaking of sensation and perception, let's talk about pain. Now, you wake up in the middle of the night and say you want to go to the bathroom, so you're groggy and you're trying to stay half asleep so that when you go back to bed, you can fall asleep again. And as you're kind of shuffling along, all of a sudden you bang your toe on a piece of furniture there. Well, the banging of your toe against the furniture produced the sensation into your brain. You know, the perception of that is now you've woke up and it was like, oh, that really hurts. But the mind can reduce the sensation of pain or even eliminate it, or it can cause one to feel pain when there's no physical reason for it to exist. So, like for instance, none of us likes to experience the sensation of pain, but it is an invaluable tool that is essential for survival. It warns us of dangerous elements in our environment. I use the example of, it was thought way back when with leprosy, that leprosy ate away people's bodies. And what they seem to have found out is leprosy destroys the nerves, so you don't feel pain. You could walk off a curb, land wrong on your foot, break your leg, but you wouldn't know about that. And then obviously continuing to walk on a broken leg is not going to be good for that. With lepers, it turns out they were put in isolation colonies in the forest, and a big problem was the rats at night would eat at them and gnaw at them, and they just wouldn't feel it. And they picked up all kinds of infections and diseases that way, where people thought that that's what was eating the body parts. But then they began to treat lepers in a humane way, and they cleaned up the surroundings and facilities and environments, and found out that whenever they hurt themselves or something was gnawing at them or something was infecting them, they treated it, and they still had some kind of quality of life. But anyway, so that's the tool that's essential for survival. It warns us of dangerous elements in our environment. Pain itself is very complicated, and because physically or psychologically, it can be influenced by our beliefs, and that's why we call this the placebo effect. And the mind can reduce the sensation of pain or even eliminate it, and can cause one to feel pain when there's no physical reason for it to exist. Now, this is very important here. This is called the gate control theory of pain control. And in the illustration here, you can see that the pain signals come in from the spinal cord. They reach the brain, and with the gate open, we feel the pain. So you stub your toe, the gate is wide open. You feel the pain. Now, in the next graphic, we see that pain signals coming from the spinal cord do not reach the brain. And with the gate closed, we feel no pain. Yeah, the gate control theory is a way to explain why pain is perceived at different levels at different times. Basically, it says that if there are competing nerve impulses coming into the brain, that it creates a sort of bottleneck and diverts our attention from the sensation of pain. Now, if you were ever into sports, say at the high school level, or maybe some of you at the college level, this is famous for what goes on in the sporting activity, where someone gets hurt, but because of the crowd noise, everybody's counting on them, the coach talking to them, they're hurt, but they go back out there and they perform well. And it's not till after the game where they come to themselves, their senses, perception, with how hurt they were. And you hear athletes talking about this a lot. Well, the adrenaline was just flowing, and I hardly felt it or I didn't feel it. But they're talking about the gate control theory. And the perception of pain can be reduced by your brain's own ability to secrete pain-reducing chemicals such as endorphins. So I think that there's probably some of that going on in those sporting events types things. And you parents out there's times where you're laid up and you don't feel good, you're ill, but whatever, your child needs something. Your child might have something going on at school, and you've got to suck it up and be there, or you've just got to take care of your child in some capacity, even though you're sick and you feel like dying. But because of the love of your child or the need of your child, you put that first. So you're talking about the gate control theory there too. Here's another term, perceptual construction, which is a mental model of external events that are actively created by the brain. A mental model of external events that are actively created by the brain. An example would be newly sighted people must learn to identify objects. Yeah, I'd heard about this where people that have been blind since birth, and through some procedure they've gotten their sight, and they don't know what they're looking at, so they have to relearn that. And so the sensation is finally there. They're seeing with their eyes what's always been in front of them. Now their brain has to put that together. And as you can see, there's a couple ways of looking at these objects here. Way number one is how and again, this is an illustration of how your brain puts this together. You might say that there's a circle and a square here. Somebody else could just go, well, it looks like a circle and a square, but it's made up of individual lines. And somebody else could just say it's individual lines that are making up patterns. So that's just different kind of perceptions, but your eyes are taking in these shapes here. Also, sensations, the sensation here, you can see the picture on the left, and it's just random patterns there. But then when you look over on the right, it's a jaguar. So again, did your brain put together the sensations into the pattern or the shape of the form of the jaguar? So you can see how, but on film there, it just looked like they were just right in front of each other, talking to each other, and Bob Newhart was an elf. So anyway, that's if you're uh, seen the movie Elf there. That's how they did the illusion there in the movie. Saved us some money. Just needed a physical set. Didn't have to CGI anything. Okay, now an hallucination is an imaginary sensation such as seeing, hearing, or smelling something that doesn't exist in the external world. Uh, from what I've been told and from what I read, LSD produces hallucinations. But I mean, you can hallucinate from other reasons besides drugs. I mean, you could be very very sick and spike a high fever, and I've heard of people hallucinating like that. You could be sleep deprived, and you could experience hallucinations like that too. So there's other ways besides drugs to experience hallucinations, but it's just an imaginary sensation, such as seeing or hearing or smelling something that doesn't exist in the external world. I worked with a gentleman one time that had a mental illness, schizophrenia, and hallucinated. And he's on medical supervision with his medication, and when he takes his medication, he doesn't hallucinate. But I asked him, I said, "What did you see when you were hallucinating?" And he said it's like those Hollywood movie type monsters is what he saw when he was hallucinating. So, kind of going hand in hand with hallucinations, we have reality testing, which is obtaining additional information to check on the accuracy of perceptions, concluding a hallucination by touching it. So, in other words, reality testing is a person that they're having a hallucination and they want to see if it's real or not. So they try to touch it. Another reality testing is it could be an auditory hallucination besides a visual one too. And there's people that reality tested by turning to someone else and go, well, do you see that or do you hear that? So that's reality testing. Circle, and there's the one we started with. So I mean, this is a clever illusion. It just seems like it's a spiral going in, when in reality each one of those lines is just a circle, and I've reality tested it just by photoshopping the circles into here, as you can see. The next one is bottoms up process, similar ways. Bottoms up processing is organizing perceptions by beginning with low level features. We begin with small sensory features and build upward to a complete perception, putting together a picture puzzle you've never seen before. So it's just starting with whatever clues or features, sensations that are there, and then building it up to a complete perception. After a while, you get the big picture. It's like an aha moment. You go, oh, okay, I know what we're doing here. So that's bottoms up processing. Don't know if any of you have ever put together these 1,000-piece puzzles, but the bottoms up processing is when you're building it for the first time. What do? You start looking for the corners, you start looking for the edges, and then you put the edges and the corner together, and then you start looking for different colors and different patterns. That's all bottoms up processing. Another example of bottoms up keep saying bottoms up processing, bottom up processing. Bottoms up is a toast, I gather, but bottom up processing. Another example of this is the Rubik's Cube, where you start looking for clues to get the to put the sides all back together. Now here's a clever illusion again, and this is bottom up processing. How many faces do you see here? And I'll give you a few minutes so you can look it over and count them and everything. Okay, and if you want to stare at that some more, I mean, you can certainly pause this here. I think in class, I'm not sure how many, but how many there is officially, but we have gotten to like 14 or 15 or something. Uh, so there's a lot of faces in that illusion. The more you look at it, the more you see it's one of those. Okay, the opposite of bottom-up processing is top-down processing. This is pre-existing knowledge to rapidly organize sensory information into meaningful perceptions, putting together a puzzle you've seen before. After a few pieces, your past experience gives you a plan to rapidly fill in the final picture. So top-down processing is knowing what you're doing. Okay, you're doing something different, but you've done it before, so you have the same general idea where this is going. So that's different, of course. That's kind of the opposite of the bottom-up processing. This is top-down processing. The Penrose stairs illusion, the endless staircase, is an example of this. You see a staircase and going up, and you keep taking it, but if you look at the picture here, it just keeps going up and up and up, and you're just locked in an endless loop there. But you know it's a staircase. And here's a little more clear picture of that. It's just the way it's drawn. Okay, that's top-down processing here. If you want to go to look at the Penrose stairs and see the YouTube video about it, please feel free. I'm not going to show that here. And I wanted to talk about the Gestalt rules of organization here. We're going to see this figure ground figure again, but Gestalt psychologists have these rules of organization. In this graphic, you're going to see the figure ground law and the law of similarity. And you can see the two there. And there's also closure, where they've got the lines there and the cat. But Gestalt psychologists believe that our brains follow a set of innate rules that govern how we organize all the individual elements we perceive into some sort of meaningful pattern. It's a wholeness. And I showed you the graphic illustration that shows the figure ground law. We'll see this again, though, that says we tend to separate what we see into the figure, which is more detailed, and the background, which is less detailed. Sometimes when we look at something, we can see the two interchangeably, as with that example. One time you see the profiles in red against a white background, then you'll see the white goblet against a red background. However, most things we look at are not that ambiguous. And then with the two, that was the law of similarity that says we like to group objects together that appear similar. That's why we perceive the number 2 in that group of dots. And then there's closure, which was the cat. That refers to our tendency to fill in the gaps in things we look at that may not actually be complete. We perceive a cat in this drawing because we fill in the blanks. Okay, the next term is figure ground organization. Figure ground organization is organizing a perception so that part of a stimulus appears to stand out as an object. That's called the figure. The one that stands out as an object is called the figure, against a less prominent background. That's the ground. Figure, ground. Figure's in the forefront, ground's in the background. That's kind of a psychological term for that. Now, as you can see from this illusion here, it looks like a vase, or a vase if you're Martha Stewart. But of course, that's if you stare at the black area. If you stare at the white area, then you see two faces there, two people talking to each other. So if the figure is the vase, then the background or the ground would be if the figure if the object is the vase, which would be the figure, then the background would be the two faces, which is the ground. Another way of looking at this too is this cube that we've all drawn. If this could have two openings, or so I mean, the opening could be facing you, or the opening could be facing, like on a clock face, it'd be like around 2 o'clock or something. So, and so you could take it back and forth too. You could take it back and forth too. So it could be the opening is facing the front, and on a clock face, it might be about 7 or 8 o'clock. Meanwhile, it could be facing up, which on a clock face could be about 1 or 2 o'clock there. So I'll let you go back and forth on that, or you can pause that here if you want to take a look at that. Okay, now this is selective attention, which is giving priority to a particular incoming sensory message. So selective attention is giving priority to a particular incoming sensory message. So what some people see here is just pages of a book. And what some people see here is a lady that might be wearing a gown, and this could be her cleavage. So anyway, but it's just what you're drawn to, either the book or the lady's what she's wearing there. So that's selective attention. Now then there's inattentional blindness, which is a failure to notice a stimulus because attention is focused elsewhere. And this is a really cool video, and I'll just post that separately here. I'm not going to play that here now. So, but if you have a couple minutes and you want to know about inattentional blindness, make sure you take a look at the video. It's really a neat video. So it's a failure to notice a stimulus because your attention is focused elsewhere. Like this here, can you spot the gorilla in the CT scan? Most radiologists couldn't. Yeah, and they tested inattentional blindness in terms of they gave radiologists the CT scan, and they said, well, what do you see in here? So they were drawn in and trying to diagnose it, but you can see there is a picture of a gorilla here, and most of them didn't see it because of inattentional blindness. I think there's an old saying, you can't see the forest through the trees. I think that's what applies here. All right, now depth perception, which is the ability to see three-dimensional space to accurately judge distances. So this is called the Ponzo illusion, where the yellow lines, as you could see when the red comes up here, there we go, when the red comes up, they are the same length. But because they're drawn on something like a railroad track that goes off into the distance, into infinity, you would think that the top one is the bigger one. And really, this illusion here is just playing with your depth perception, which is the ability to see three-dimensional space to accurately judge distances. So when I play with your depth perception like this, you can accurately judge distances. Now, this is an incredible illusion here. This is a lack of depth perception that would cause this here. So what you see here is a spinning dancer. Now, you can make her I'm not doing anything. I'm not touching any buttons on here. I'm not advancing any slides. But you can actually make her just with your perception. You see the sensation coming in with, the visual sensation, but just with your perception alone, you can make her spin the other way. Matter of fact, when you get good at it, you can make her spin both ways, back and forth. Now, the way that most people have been able to do this is looking down at her feet, her foot that's planted, and actually the reflection of the planted foot. That's where people have been able to make her spin the other way. So we'll give you a few seconds here. You can try that on your own. Okay, that's a really cool illusion. You can show your kids that one. I get a lot of people that run home and show the kids that. They really like stuff like that. And if you want to spend some time with it, here's the link to it. So I mean, you could just go over to Wikipedia there and look for spinning dancer, and you'll be able to get that spinning dancer illusion. But that's a complete lack of depth perception causing that. Okay, now we come to the apparent distance hypothesis, which is an explanation of the moon illusion, stating that the horizon seems more distant than the night sky. You know, there are times you look up at the night sky and the moon might be as big uh, as a penny or a nickel, or even small, or a penny or a dime, even smaller than that maybe. And then there's times you see it off on the horizon. It's huge. It's a supermoon. And that's because of the apparent distance hypothesis. And here's another picture of the supermoon here. An explanation of the moon illusion, stating that the horizon seems more distant than the night sky. So the moon just seems closer because of the perception, because of the depth perception approaching us. See, so here you see the car here on the right. It's closer to you, so it just seems bigger. And then you see the car on the left, and it just seems smaller because it's further away. But it's still the same size. It has a perceptual constancy. It's not like it's growing or shrinking. So with this here, when you look down at it, straight down like your book, it's just a square. But when you put it further out, it looks like hexagon shape. Anyway, it's keystone, just like sometimes slides do when you're projecting them. And you know, the slide projector's lower than the screen level. It keystones like that, but it's still a square. It's still a square. It has shape constancy. See, it's just here's lighted. I mean, but the shirt is the same color. It's just it might be out in bright sunlight, and then later on, it looks more of an orange, but it could be you know, the setting sun or something, or it's just dim light or something that's changing that. But it's not changing colors. It's just your perception is changing. So it has brightness and color constancy. Now you can play with this constancy too. Uh, I don't know if you've ever seen some of these amazing chalk drawings, but I mean here you see the floor looks like it's opened up, and it looks like there's some kind of harbor or something underneath, and yet it's just your perception. There's still constancy. The floor is there. It hasn't opened up. You know, there's not a harbor underneath the floor. Uh, it just looks that way. It's just the illusion created by the artist. You know, here's a Lego army, and so this is a sidewalk chalk drawing, and it looks like, you know, all these Lego figures are just standing in the bottom there. But you know, if you view it from other angles, you just see it was the way it was drawn. Clever illusion, though. Clever illusion. Okay, the book does touch on ESP at the end. So this is the purported ability to perceive events in a way that cannot be explained by known capacities of sensory organs. So they talk about like an extrasensory perception, ESP, and that falls under psi or psychic phenomenon, events that seem to lie outside the realm of accepted laws. So as psychology, you might hear about parapsychology, and some of the things in parapsychology or psi phenomenon is telepathy, which is reading people's minds, precognition, which is knowing about future events, clairvoyance. This is getting in touch with, I think, people's souls, or you know, long dead or something, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be. Psychokinesis is moving things just with the power of your mind. Seems like the Russians were experimenting with things like that. I've seen I've seen videos of things like that. Near-death experiences, little, could be psychic phenomenon. uh, you know, could be a little bit more to that. It just seems like people that have clinically died and are brought back, a lot of them tell very similar stories from their experience. I mean, they talk about a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of them talk about uh, when they died that this peace came over them and they saw this, they were in this tunnel and they were moving towards this light. And some of them talk about long dead people that have passed before them, beckoning them on. And as they got closer to the light, it was a very peaceful experience. And then whatever, they might be resuscitated or come back, and they just talk about this experience. Uh, it could be a final hallucination, like we talked about. It could, they've talked about like these neurons firing and discharging, uh, and as the body's dying, the brain's dying, and they're brought back. I have a little more affinity to this one, though. I remember that my father telling me that my grandmother was in a nursing home at the time, at the end of her life, and she took my father told me that she said about 2 weeks before she did pass away, she woke up in the middle of the night and she felt very peaceful and calm, and she could see this bright light, and that seemed to last a few minutes, and then the experience left her, and then 2 weeks later she passed away. So yeah, just a personal experience, from somebody I know. Maybe there's a little bit more to this. Okay, but anyway, reincarnation, and I believe that the Hindus believe, the Hindu religions believe in this. If I'm not mistaken, if I am, my apologies. Please correct me. But it's like you determine in this life uh, what you're going to be born into in the next life. So life is just an endless, eternal uh, uh, series of lives. And if you're a good person in this life, or you live in poverty in this life, but you're a good person in the next life, maybe you'd come back as like a rich person or something. I think that's how reincarnation goes, and I think they call that karma, if I'm not mistaken. Um, and then there's apparitional experiences, people that think they see and talk to spirits and ghosts. And then remote viewing might be a little bit more something to this. I know the CIA and the Russians were experimenting with things like this, and certainly out at the Stanford Research Institute (SRI) back in the 70s and 80s, I think they did some full-blown experiments about this. And from what I've read, uh, it seems like the CIA did have some kind of psychic spies or something. They were trying to get any edge in the Cold War. So anyway, but you can read up on things like that if you want. Okay, that'll do it for our discussion lecture for today, and uh, thank you for your attention.